Station, where our veterans' voices are heard. MBR Talk.
Hey, thanks for supporting our channel by watching and listening.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
Desde Brooklyn hasta el sol del Medio Oriente, José Flores con fuego en la mente. Raised in the Bronx where dreams don't sleep, donde el hambre te enseña a resistir. Section 8 life, no handouts, no cheat. He built his power from the pain on the street.
Cada golpe, cada lágrima caída fue el fuego que encendió su vida. Ahora camina con propósito y voz. José Flores, hear the noise. De la calle al combate, turn his trials into faith. Con disciplina y con fe, now he rises every day. From the black to the world sin temor.
You ever need a haircut?
So
that these kids can learn how to play instruments or want to, not just learn, but want to. But I think that there's a major shift.
Iraq to Korea, he led from the front. Now he lifts others, never just stunts. Hoy es mentor, líder, amigo.
Welcome, everyone, to the Motivated Mindset. I'm your host, Jose Antonio Flores, a proud Latino born in the Bronx, raised in Brooklyn, New York. That New York flavor, that hustle, that resilience, it shaped me, challenged me, and continues to fuel todo lo que yo hago, everything I do. I'm a combat veteran who served proudly for 30 years in the United States Army. And before we get started, mi gente, I want to send a heartfelt salute to all my veterans, active duty service members, military families, and first responders joining us today. Thank you for todo lo que tú haces, for all your service. We see you, we appreciate you, and we're grateful for everything that you do. Look, mi gente, when I retired from the Army, I thought one chapter of service was ending. I'm done. What I quickly discovered was that service doesn't stop when we take off that uniform. For me, the next mission was the federal government. Man, I had an incredible privilege of continuing to serve our nation in several federal leadership roles, from working at Fort Meade, supporting the garrison agency, to serving as an EEO specialist and disability program manager, and later as an alternative dispute resolution coordinator for U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development headquarters in D.C. Mi gente, I love what I do. Throughout that journey, I helped employees resolve conflict, build programs that strengthen workplace culture, develop leadership training, expanded ADR services, and had the privilege of teaching leaders across the country, right? And I tell you something, it was an amazing experience working for the Federal Service, because behind every agency, behind every mission, behind every policy are dedicated public servants who wake up todos los días. They wake up every morning committing to making a difference. You know, most people never see what happens behind the curtains, right? Behind the scenes. They don't see the men and women who quietly solve problems, improve systems, protect our country, and support communities, and help move our nation adelante, forward. They don't do it for applause. They don't do it because they believe in something bigger than themselves, you know? And that's what public service is all about, mi gente. Today, as a motivational speaker, a certified personal trainer, a certified mediator, and an end-of-life death doula, that same commitment continues to guide me in todo lo que yo hago, everything I do, because titles may change, but the purpose, mi gente, doesn't. My mission has always been to serve, right? To, como se dice, to inspire, to encourage, to help people discover that no matter a donde tú empezaste, when in life you started, right, the best chapter can still be ahead for you, you know, and that's why the Motivated Mindset exists, right? Because this podcast is about resilience, right? It's about leadership. It's about purpose, you know, it's about faith, growth, right? Culture, and the mindset that allows ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary things. We keep it real here, real conversations, real stories, real lessons, right? And sometimes we'll laugh, right? And sometimes we'll reflect. Sometimes we will challenge ourselves, because it happens to me every time. But every episode is designed to leave you a little stronger than when you arrive, when you push that button, right? Because motivation gets you started, mindset keeps you going. Now, let's talk about today's guest, right? Today, I have the honor of sitting down with someone who has dedicated his vida, his life, to serving our nation, not in the spotlight, but through quiet, impactful work that keeps government moving and people empowered. Our guest is Dr. Javier E. Inclán, Assistant Inspector General for the Management at the National Science Foundation Office of Inspector General, where he oversees human capital, information technology, budget, procurement, training, and key business operations that support one of our nation's premier scientific institutions. His federal career is nothing, como se dice, short of remarkable. Over the years, he served in leadership role with the U.S. Army, hoorah, all right, the U.S. Marshal Services and Department of Transportation, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and now the National Science Foundation. That's, como se dice, decades of leading people, building organizations, and strengthening the public's trust in government. He also is a fellow of the National Academic of Public Administration and continues to shape the future of federal leadership, right? Through organizations like CIGIE, Leadership Innovation Committee, and the ACT-IAC Talent Community of Interest, helping develop the next generation, como se dice, of public servants, you know? So what I ask is, you know, grab a notebook, lean in, right? Because I have a feeling you're going to walk away inspired by this conversation. And one last thing I want to talk about, one last thing, and I'm gonna put this in there, you'll see it. If this conversation inspires you, if you believe leadership rooted in service can change vidas, lives, if you enjoy these conversations, right, and want to help us continue to build incredible guests for the Motivated Mindset, I dropped it in the YouTube in the chat. And as you see in front of you, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this episode. You know, your support helps us amplify stories that educate, inspire, and motivate people across the country and around el mundo, the world. I don't know, that sounds pretty cool. How you doing? Please help me now as we get ready. We're about to welcome the MAN. That means the man, right? So somebody who truly embodies servant leadership. So give me a moment because we're about to make this happen, Captain. Oh, wow.
The interview of the week is brought to you by Jersey Mike's, a sub above.
Javier, how you doing, my man? How are you doing?
Jose, I'm doing great, man. How you doing?
I am doing stupendous now that you're here, right? Hey, I'm just really proud to have you here. And I think before we start, people want to know who you are before you became these titles, where you're from, and so on.
Yeah, sure. So Javier Inclán, I was born and raised in northern New Jersey. My dad was Cuban. My mom is from Spain. My dad passed in 2011, but my mom's still kicking at 83, so she's doing great. Humble beginnings. Parents worked hard. My dad left Cuba in 1961, went to Spain for a couple of years, did all his paperwork, did all the right things, came to the U.S. in 63, worked his tail off until, he retired in the mid 90s and, gave my sister and I a life along with my mom that we couldn't be more proud of. I always tell folks, because, sometimes there's a stigma about immigrants, right? And about this country. My dad teared up every time he heard the Star Spangled Banner. Wow. And he used to tell me, Hijo, no matter what people say, no matter what happens, this is the best country on earth where you could give me and your mom an opportunity, which then we were able to pass on to you and your sister. So that makes me proud. Now that I'm a public servant, that makes me even more proud because I'm, hopefully living a life that he would be proud of.
Wow, no, that is stupendous. I know same thing with my parents when they came. My dad came from Puerto Rico and we lived in the South Bronx, and same thing. He said, hey, there is no country better than this. You got to work hard, and when somebody said, MJ, what's up, MJ? She said, amen, best country on earth. Oh, wow. Thank you for that. And Javier, who was some of your mentors as you were growing up?
Yeah. So even as a kid, I went to Catholic schools. Some of the nuns in my school were, they were tough, but they taught me some life lessons. Some teachers I had in high school. I umpired and referee. Umpired baseball and softball, referee basketball. Learned a lot from there. But it really got to, so I also worked in local and state government. I have some amazing mentors, and almost all of them were unofficial, right? Not a mentoring program, but people that, you know, just really were there for me. You were able to answer questions for me. I had a lot of sponsors, people that were in the room when I wasn't allowed to be in the room or wasn't able to be in the room, that stuck up for me and spoke up for me and gave me opportunities. And then in the federal government, it was like something completely amazing. You know, people like a guy named Wanzi Gardner, Robin Bailey, you know, people that, you know, Rhonda Davis, just so many great people that taught me, you know, and were able to instill in me that work ethic and give me opportunities that I never thought, you know, somebody from Northern New Jersey would be able to get.
Northern New Jersey. Okay. I give you a break, bro. You know, that's okay, man. I'm from New York.
And, you know, hey, you're being sponsored by Jersey Mike. So we're gonna right. But I will tell you, Jose, something, I don't know if we talked about this before. I used to work at Monroe College in the Bronx on Fordham Road, on Jerome Avenue and Fordham Road. So I know the area of the Bronx and the South Bronx very well.
No, it's funny. I never went more into Jersey other than to Palisades, you know, or something like that. This park that used to be there. I don't even think it's there anymore, you know. But you know,
Palisades Park. Freddie Boom Boom Cannon says song about that. Yeah.
Hey, it's Atlantic City. Atlantic City's in Jersey, right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
I love Atlantic City. I like to go up in there. No, that's cool. That's cool. You know, and you know what? Because I know for me growing up, a lot of values my parents. But what values your parents taught you that still carry today in these leadership positions for you?
Yeah, first and foremost, faith, right? Okay. You know, belief in God, belief in, you know, that there's a higher power, you know, that part of, you know, family, you know, no matter what happened, 6 o'clock, 6:30, we'd be sitting at the dinner table, you know, don't miss a meal, you know, with the family when you're growing up, right? That's not, that wasn't a good thing. And really work ethic, right? And both of my parents at different times were on unemployment, you know, they lost their jobs. And that was tough. And they tried to shield me and my sister from the negativity. Always had faith, always said, hey, this is going to turn around. We're going to do okay. You know, my mom worked overtime a lot and you know, trying to make, you know, being able to buy a house in the early 80s, you know, really just, I saw firsthand what hard work and dedication meant. And it didn't matter what the paycheck was. It just mattered that they were telling us, no matter what you do, be happy with what you do, work hard, and things will be all right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that is something a lot of people come to this country do. And, you know, and those are some of the values that I got from them, from my parents, you know. And, you know, a lot of people choose different careers, you know. What made you choose service?
Yeah, I mentioned to you about my dad and what he taught me about this country and how he got here and how he worked hard. Growing up, I saw a lot of, growing up in an urban area, I saw a lot of folks struggle and how they use, you know, the services of the government to, you know, to be better. I worked in the local recreation department when I was in high school and in college, you know, so that, you know, exposed me to some of the local government stuff. And that's really what I wanted to do. I just wanted to give back. I saw that people were really doing it for the right reason. My experience, you know, in government has been that the majority of folks do it for the right reason. They want to improve, you know, the lives of the American people. And that's really what got me going. I said, if I could do something that, yeah, sure, it's going to give me a good life, but it's going to be able to make me proud at the end of the day and say, hey, I did something that was worthwhile. That's what it's about for me.
Yeah. And I know we talked about, you know, working when we were meeting earlier, how the federal government was something that I truly enjoyed, you know. And when we talk about, you know, when we talk about how is public servant mindset different from simply working for a government organization?
You know, that's a good question. To me, working for a government organization is really just that, where you work, right? I work at this agency, or I work at that agency, or in this department, that department. Having a public service mindset is about how you approach that work and the outcomes of the work, right? Regardless of what you do, you know, in public service, that mindset really has to be focused on, you know, why are you doing it and how are you doing it? You know, having a government email or working in a federal building doesn't make you, you know, doesn't make you have a public service mindset. It's really, you're a government worker. It's much more than that to me. Having that mindset means, how do you approach that job and what are the outcomes that you're trying to achieve?
Yes, absolutely. I know one of the hardest things is always, you know, when they had USA Jobs, it's just trying to get in. And I tell people that is probably the most challenging part of applying for a federal job. But you know, once you get in, man, you know, como dicen, the world is your oyster. I learned that, you know, you do the work that you want to do. And I know you especially have led, como se dice, professionals in areas such as human capital, information technology, and other mission support functions. You know, how do you help employees in those roles recognize that they are directly contributing to the public mission?
Yeah, it's tough sometimes. You know, folks in the mission support areas, sometimes they don't see that connection. They don't see how they're supporting the mission. They hear about these agencies doing great things, you know, from a mission perspective, but they don't make that tie-in. And I've always tried, from my perspective, to make that link for them, right? You know, to make sure that they understand that what they do matters, and this is why it matters. When I was at the Department of Transportation, we would say the mission is the train, but mission support is the tracks, right? Without the tracks, the train's not going anywhere, right?
Right.
And it's really, you know, in HR, if we hire really outstanding, you know, employee, or help somebody, a hiring manager hire somebody outstanding because we put out great certificate, great announcement, all these things, that's the connection, right? You have something to do with Jose Flores being hired at HUD, or Javier Inclán being hired at National Science Foundation. You know, IT, if you develop an application that's going to help a criminal investigator do their job better, to go see, you know, find fraud in you know, some of the grants that NSF issues, that's, you know, being part of the mission. If you make sure that you do improve a process that's going to save hours of time, you know, of those mission people, that is helping the mission. I'll give you a quick example. A couple of years ago, my office, the Office of Inspector General, we are responsible for mostly grant fraud, investigating grant fraud, but also what we do is over the last few years, since 2023, we've been investigating sexual assault in Antarctica. Believe it or not, make that connection, right? So the National Science Foundation runs the U.S. Antarctic program in Antarctica. They have 3 bases. And, you know, there's folks that live in Antarctica, you know, for some time to do their mission, you know, do their scientific research, and then have that logistical support as well. And unfortunately, there were some things that occurred that, you know, there needed to be a law enforcement presence there. And, you know, one of the things that we realized was that when we went down there, when the investigators went down there, or the auditors went down there wasn't much trust, because we were using you know, the NSF network run by contractors.
Right.
And we really felt, from a IT perspective, that we really needed to have our own network. How the heck does that happen when you're in the most remote area in the world, pretty much, right?
Yeah.
So I sat down with the director of IT who worked for me. And really, we just sat down and we said, well, how about if we just did a satellite network on our own? And it was one of those like out of the box ideas. And he and his team did a lot of research. They came back, they gave some recommendations. And I sent one of our early career IT specialists to Antarctica with one of our colleagues, and they actually installed a satellite network that now we use 24/7, 365 days a year, that's up and running, that we could then safely communicate our investigative things and our audit things, you know, back home without having any external interference. And that's something that is, I told her, I said, could you imagine putting that on your resume, what that means for you? And there's an immediate tie to the mission there, right? You're doing something that's going to allow them to do their job. So those are things that I try to do, and make that connection so that they really feel empowered to continue moving their mission forward, so that they could support the mission of the organization.
That is amazing. You're right. I would have never made that connection. Antarctica, that was, wow. That is, to be honest, I didn't even know we had things up there other than the military, other than, you know, maybe U.S. Army civilians working up there and so on. That is incredible. You know, so, you know, with that being said, what do you tell leaders who want, let's say, authority, but have not earned trust? You know, this is from Millie from Texas, who asked that question. Not earned that trust.
Yeah, look, there needs to be a reset, right? Some leaders go in and look, I've been guilty of this. You know, you want to make so much change, you want to make so much impact. Yeah, you think you're doing the right thing, but people that work for you, people that work with you, they know what they're doing. They're there for a reason. I always have this unofficial, mantra that when I go into a new organization, I don't change anything for 90 days, right? And I try to talk to people, and I try to make my own opinion of, what the organization is, what the people are, and what the mission is. And I may have thoughts about how things could be done better, but that doesn't mean that there's not a different way of doing it, and it ends up being, as good or even better. So trying to gain that trust from your employees is critical to be successful. And it's never too late, right? Even if you go a little too far, it's that self-reflection, right? Maybe doing a 360 study, getting that feedback from your folks, and then just doing a reset and trying to turn that around. If you don't have trust, man, it is really hard to lead. The days of, do as I say, not as I do, I don't believe in that. That may work in some organizations. And even sometimes it's a requirement because, okay, I heard you, I listened to you, but we're going to go this way and that's it. But at least they know that they had an opportunity to be heard, that they had an opportunity to be able to influence the decision and provide data. And maybe the leader's aperture is a little wider. But my thing is, even if I go in a different direction, I explain to them why. And that hopefully has them learn and has them grow in their careers.
Yeah. And I can truly relate. When I was coming up through the military, and when I had a leader that, when I asked a question, explain it to me, and I didn't need them to agree with me, but okay, I see now, just talk to me. And that gave me the trust to build in that leader, because they took the time to walk me through why this was done and so on. And because you're right, I don't see the big picture. And then when I became a leader, I learned from some of my best mentors and leaders to explain to my soldiers, hey, why we're doing this, and earn that respect, because they're going to do what I tell them to do. But if I get that trust for them, they go with me wherever I need to go, which brings me to the point, like, what advice would you give somebody, an early career employee who wants to make public service a meaningful long-term career?
Yeah, be curious. Learn as much as you can. I've told some of the early career folks that they may not have started a family yet or even have any ties to a certain area. If somebody asks you to go travel somewhere, go travel somewhere. Just like I asked, my IT specialist, go down to Antarctica, for goodness sake, right? When are you going to get the opportunity to do that? You being in the military, you've been to, a gazillion different places, right? And you learn, you get those experiences. Learn from other people, listen, right? Provide your input, but also keep your ears open and don't think that you know everything, especially early on. Because you may have the technical skill set that you learned at work, at school, but at work, the application may be a little different. I'd also say that public service is a very wide field, right? Even if you go into the government for a few years and you want to go to the private sector and get that experience and then bring that experience back to the public sector, what you learned, there's nothing wrong with that, right? To be able to go in and out, even, working in the private sector, but supporting the government, also, part of public service and having that mindset. So don't limit your choices, don't limit your options. Also, some people feel that they're stuck in their agency. They just want to work in that one agency. I'm not saying to job jump or agency jump or anything or agency hop, too often, but keep your mind open, right? Especially in the mission support area where you could really do what you do in almost any agency. Keep that aperture open so that you could always, look at your career in a way that's much more broad, that your aperture is broader. And then if you want to go back to that agency, be able to bring back all the things that you learned elsewhere.
Absolutely. And we had a comment, Migdalia said, well said, keep learning. We said, absolutely.
Migdalia knows about that.
Yes, she does. She does.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we have this is from a LinkedIn user said, hola Javier, what is the leadership lesson you learned the hard way? And how did it transform your approach to service? Yvette.
Yeah. Ooh, I always say that you learn a lot from great leaders. You also learn a lot from not so great leaders, yes. Right? And you look at them and you say, hey, hopefully if I'm in that situation, I won't do that. I won't go into specifics, but there was a time where I was put in a situation where I had to explain to a higher up, that what they were doing was not the best way to do it from a financial perspective. Mm-hmm. And it was almost as if my boss was accusing me of accusing the leader of doing something, that wasn't, that was wasteful and abuse or something like that. And it was something that stuck with me. And basically what I told this person, I said, look, I'm not accusing anybody of anything. I'm just giving you my perspective as a professional in my field. and my recommendation would be this, and you only get to spend this amount of money and you're going to get to the same outcome. And that person was like, oh, what a great idea. Thank you, Javier, no problem. And she left the room and I stayed in the room. My boss, I said, what the heck was that? And they were like, what do you mean? I said, you basically told your big boss that I was accusing the head of the agency of doing it. Like, that's not cool, right? Right. And I always, I mean, that was a leadership lesson that I learned. And, you know, from that point on, I was like, man, I have to assume positive intent. And I have to make sure that, you know, when I say things like that, or I ask somebody to do something, that I do it in a way that's in a positive nature, as opposed to trying to deflect and not, you know, she didn't want to make the hard call and make that decision or have that conversation. So she basically threw it on her subordinate. And, you know, I just, that still sticks with me a little bit. But it's something that, you know, it was a hard lesson to learn, but man, did I learn it. I learned it well.
Wow. Yeah. And to go back to what you had said before about be curious, you know, and I remember when I first joined, and my leader asked me, hey, do you want to try something different? Put me on what they call detail. I think that's what they call it.
Yeah.
And he put me on a detail for 180 days. I end up loving it, you know, and I end up staying. And, you know, with that being said, you know, what's one habit every leader should develop?
Yeah. I think, you know, so I'm going to pull the thread on that detail, because I think it's a good point. And I think the habit is to be open to opportunities, even if you're going outside your comfort zone. Yeah. So November of 2018, so we're talking almost 8 years ago, the chief operating officer at NSF calls me up and says, hey, you know, the two executives in HR are leaving. One's retiring, the other one's going to another agency. And I was like, yeah, that's a bummer. You know, they're good people. And he's like, you know, can I ask you to go run HR for a little bit? Wow. And I was like, sir, you know, I was in facilities and security administrative services, right? And I was like, you know, I've written a position description or two in my life, but, you know, I'm not that guy. And he said, and I'll never forget it, and I love the guy to death. And he said, Javier, aren't you the guy that told me that the senior executive service was created to be able to lead any organization, even if they're not the technical expert in that, you know, work series? And I said, you son of a gun, you're using my words against me. And he said, so that means you're going to take it? I said, yeah, of course I'm going to take it. Here's the amazing part, right? So this was November of 2018. My first day was December 9th of 2018. And 12 days later, if you recall, it was the beginning of a 35-day government shutdown.
Yes.
So now I'm signing, you know, furlough notices to 1,500 employees. If folks didn't know me at NSF before that, they certainly knew me then. And I stayed in that job for 8 months until they found a permanent. And it was, Jose, it was the best experience in my federal career. Wow. It really gave me a great understanding of what HR really meant. Mm-hmm. I created such a bond with the people I work with. They're some of my closest work friends, even to this day. Because, you know, we're battle buddies, right? You know, you have a 35-day shutdown. Nobody ever, you know, that was the longest one up until recently. It was the longest shutdown, you know, ever in the history of the government. So we're doing things that, you know, we had, you know, talk to OPM and talk to OMB and talk to all these folks and trying to figure out, you know, for what worked for our agency. And it was just a great experience. But the only reason that occurred is, and I don't think they would have made me do, right? Even though, you know, we joked about it. He probably would have let me off the hook, but he really, I give him a lot of credit. He gave me the opportunity and had that trust in me and my boss as well. So it was something that I really, really enjoyed. It was tough. It was hard. But man, if I would have said no, I would have missed out on really the best opportunity I was ever given in my federal career.
Absolutely. No, and sometimes you know, you have to get people out of their comfort zone, you know, your employees, and put them in positions that they normally would not go. And that was a perfect opportunity. And then he used those words against you, what you said about, wasn't it you? And you're like, oh man, that was amazing. We have a question from a LinkedIn user, and the question says, when you think about legacy, what impact do you hope your public service leaves for the next generation of leaders?
Yeah. Integrity, that I did things for the right reason, that I made the tough decisions even when it wasn't in my best interest, because it was in the best interest of the American people. And lastly, that what I did was all in service to the American people, to be able to leave the institutions that I either ran or worked in better than when I found them, and to be able to say that hopefully I did something to create the next generation of leaders that are going to come behind us, and that I imparted some wisdom to them so that they don't have to struggle through some of the things that some of us may have struggled throughout our career. I always say that people find it hokey when I say, I don't find it to be a nice to have or a good thing to do to mentor the next generation. As a senior executive, I think it's my responsibility to do that. And I think everybody should do it if they have the capacity to do it and they have the right intentions to do it. I currently serve as a mentor for OPM's LEAD program, which is Leadership for an Efficient and Accountable Government. I see some really strong GS-14s and GS-15s in these programs, and I envision them sitting in the senior executive chair at some point. And that makes me proud, Jose, because I was blessed. I said before, I had so many great mentors, but especially sponsors, people that told me about opportunities, that were able to mold me in a way that, allowed me to be ready, give me the arrows in my quiver so that I can be prepared for the next opportunity. Even if it wasn't in that agency, people were just so not selfish. They were so kind. And even when they gave recommendations, they're like, I don't want to lose you, but man, did I give you a strong reference because I think you deserve it, right? So I think it's an opportunity for people to be able to give back. And again, it sounds hokey, but I really believe that in my heart of hearts, that our responsibility is to make sure that the next generation of leaders are sufficiently trained and sufficiently motivated to take on those opportunities, regardless of what the climate looks like. Sometimes people say, I don't even think it's worth being an SES, or I don't think it's worth being an executive, or I don't want to do this, or I don't want to do that. Well, if not you, then who? And if not now, then when, right? So let's get ready. And hopefully I'm doing my little part. And that could be part of my legacy, that hopefully I left the institutions that I worked in a little better than when I found them, and that I helped mold the next generation of federal civil servants.
No, that is awesome. That is really good. I know for a lot of people, fear holds us back so much. Because let me tell you, when my SES asked me to take on that role, it was fear, but I said, you know what? Let me do it. And it was the best thing I ever did, because I became the ADR, personnel, and I loved it. It was, like you said, had I said, you know what? No, I'm okay, I would have lost a great opportunity for that. We have another question, and let's see, this one, Migdalia. It says, have you ever had to deal with a situation where you became close with a colleague and that same person lied about you in order to get a job? How do you handle working with an individual after?
Luckily, I've never really been in that type of situation. That is brutal. I can't even imagine going through that. I could tell you that I've been in situations where, I don't know if they lied about me, but they, try to put me down in a certain way to try to make them, look better, instead of just trying to go in there themselves. They try to instigate some things with the hiring manager that I really didn't appreciate, and I didn't learn about till after the fact. In that situation, I did get the job, but it was I didn't find out till later, and it wasn't through them. And I always tell people, I didn't pick me for a job. Somebody else picked me for a job, right? The hiring manager picked me for a job. You want to get mad, get upset, don't get upset at the hiring manager. Don't get mad at me. But man, that would be something that I don't know if I could get over that, right? That's something that, it's very easy to say, well, you got to get past it and work with the person. But man, if they lied on you like that is something that I don't know. That's a tough situation. Yeah, probably you have to have enough emotional intelligence and savvy to keep it moving. But that's always going to stick in the back of your head, right? And that trust that you said that we had before probably isn't going to come back. I always tell folks, I'm of the opinion that I try to trust everybody from the beginning, right? Even though I'm from Jersey, you know, I don't have that cynical piece of me too much. So I try to give people the benefit of the doubt and try to be, really look at people as if they're coming from a place of good. Mm-hmm. But if I lose that trust, it's really, really difficult for me to get it back. I'll tell you a quick story. I had an employee once who we're looking to hire a contractor. And, you know, there were a couple of candidates that we're doing meet and greets with, right? Because we don't hire the contractor, the vendor does, but they gave us an opportunity to meet them. And I was like, okay, great. And there were two candidates that were really, really strong. And that contractor was going to work in my office, but I had my two colleagues with me. So I said, hey, you know, anything you want to say about, no, everything, you know, both of them are great. And I asked a question, look, do you have any history with these people or do you know them? Both of them said, nope. And then somebody told me, hey, I really think that one of the people in that room knows one of the candidates. I was like, that's interesting. So I made the mistake of going on LinkedIn and there was a connection there. And there was actually an endorsement there from the person in the room. So I gave benefit of the doubt. So we had another meeting. I said, hey, if either one of you know one of the candidates, you know, and this guy was really pushing for this one towards the end. And I said, look, do you have, if you know them and you know the work quality, that's great. Nope. And I was like, can I see you in my office? Wow. And then I brought his boss in with him. He was a second line to me. So his first line worked for me. And I said, all right, I'm going to give you one last chance. Like I'm really being open. I said, one last chance. Do you know this person that you're really pushing hard for? And he's like, nope. So I pull up my phone, I put up LinkedIn, and I show him his profile with the recommendation or the endorsement. Right. And he looked at me and he said, oh, is that how you're going to be? And I was like, oh no, he didn't just say that. So I said, yeah, that's the way I'm going to be. I said, somebody actually mentioned this to me. I felt as if I needed to look into this. I gave you 3 different opportunities to come clean. It isn't even a problem. I hope that you know the person, and that's why you're recommending them. But for you to just look me in the face, lie to me, and then deny it, and then say, oh, that's how we're going to be. You know, so needless to say, I sent him to his office. I talked to his boss. I said, look, you got to take care of this or I will. So she sent him home. He was really upset. A couple of days later, he came and, you know, apologized. But there was something still there, like, you know, for a long time that I was like, man, that trust eroded, right? Like I really need to get over it, but how do I do that? And we ended up being fine. But man, it's just something to me. It's like, my word is my bond. My word means more to me than a signature, right? If you look at me in the face and you tell me something, that better be rock solid, right? Because that's the way I am. And I try to be, you know, as easygoing as possible, but my word is my bond. And when they lied to me to my face, I was like, man, that's hard to get over.
That is a hard situation. I've dealt with some of those in the military, but it's a little bit different in the military. We can actually take action, but once that trust is gone, it's hard to lead. It's hard to lead within the organization. Absolutely. What we're gonna do, we're gonna take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, Javier, I want to talk about, you know, over these past 20 years, how your leadership has changed, if any, and also talk about NAFI roles and stuff like that. And we'll come back. And ladies and gentlemen, if you have any more questions, please continue to post, and we'll be right back. Here we go.
It's the guts and it's the glory. 100 stripes, 100 stories. It's the Pledge of Allegiance on the 4th of July. It's them handwritten letters from home. It's them sleepless nights alone. It's his newborn baby he left with his wife. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, lay down, here's a line. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, for these stars and stripes, hey. From the fields of Indiana to the swamps of Louisiana, to the golden coast of California. Uncle Sam's the only family he's got. His purple heartbeat won't stop. And his 18th birthday was the day he was born. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, lay down, hear the light. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, for these stars and stripes. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, stand on the front line. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, pay the ultimate price. He was the man of the house when he was born. His family is proud but torn. But if you knew him, you would understand. He was raised on how to be brave, just to see the flag still wave. And then he came home with only one hand. 'Cause Mr. Red, White, and Blue, lay down, hear the light. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, for these stars and stripes. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, stand on these front lines. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, he'll pay the ultimate price. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, lay down his life. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, for these stars and stripes. March in line, march in line. Hey. Hey.
The station where our veterans' voices are heard. MBR Talk.
Hey, thanks for supporting our channel by watching and listening.
Find us on the web at nbradio.us.
All right, welcome back, Javier. Thank you. Wait, what'd you think of that commercial, bro?
That's amazing. Mr. Red, White, and Blue. I love it.
Brother, if I had hair, te digo, but I don't. But you know, I that's one of my favorite songs, man. It's just stupendous. But I got a question from we got a question from Yvette. And before we get into this, she said, being a leader can feel heavy sometimes. What helps you stay calm and keep going when everyone depends on you?
Focus. All right, focus on the mission. Head down and do the work. Yeah, sometimes it's heavy, and we've been through a lot, during my federal career. But man, it's just about, if people are relying on you, you have to put your best face forward. You have to put on, that face that is a positive, that's a positivity of, coming from a good place, assuming positive intent. There's times where it does get heavy and it does get difficult and challenging, and sometimes it doesn't work out, and people can't understand why certain decisions are made. But at the end of the day, some things are just, above our pay grade, as they say. Right. And it's like, no, well, this is the reason why. This is the best we got, and let's move forward and let's do the mission, and we'll get through this just like we got it through, everything else over the years. And it's just trying to, roll up your sleeves and do the best you can with the cards you're dealt. And sometimes it's working long hours or doing things that aren't, exactly in your position description, but fall under the category of additional duties as assigned. Just trying to give them that positive outlook and say, it's going to be okay. Right. Come talk to me if you need to, let's keep this moving. Let's focus on the mission. And at the end of the day, we're going to be better off for it.
Absolutely. No, that's great. I know when I was a leader, the biggest thing is making sure that the people who work for me knew that I was approachable. That's big, because we even have, and I know when in my last organization, we had like an open door policy, but make sure you use your chain of command before you come see me. Let your leaders give them an opportunity, before you come see me. But you're right. And another thing, presence is so big. when I was in, and even at the job, just being there, making sure that, you know, hey, I'm here to support you. Can't be there all the time, but I understand that whatever I'm giving you, you know, you're going to make a difference, and trusting your subordinates to do the right thing. But I'm here if you need any more guidance or whatever. And, you know, another question we got, where do you see the biggest gap between what employees need and what leaders think employees need? You know, so.
Yeah, I think the biggest gap is a gap in understanding, understanding what the mission is and what the mission needs from the employees and from the leader to be accomplished. And that starts with communication, right? Being able to communicate with your subordinates, with your colleagues, explain what they need and explain what they need to do. But then listen, right? Listen to what the employees are telling you. Sometimes, you know, they're telling you things that you're not, you know, you're hearing, but you're not listening to. And I think that, you know, we can't be making too many assumptions because that could go down a rabbit hole and it's going to be really difficult to come back from. But trying to understand where they're coming from. For example, sometimes folks think that they need a certain class to do better, or, you know, something like that. And maybe there's no money, you know, to send them to that class. So then as a leader, what do I do to give them that, you know, that experience or that knowledge in order for them to, you know, do their work better? So there's always that open communication that needs to occur. And it's got to be bilateral, right? It's not just the leader telling the employee. It's, you know, you got to listen as a leader and be able to understand where that employee is coming from. And maybe they have a misunderstanding of something, or you know, their concept is incorrect. Well, then let them know that and try to come to a mutual understanding.
Okay, no, that absolutely. We have another question, and the question said, great dialogue. Any advice for aspiring senior executives on what paths to pursue while managing others and sometimes managing up? How do you advocate for yourself to ask for training opportunities?
Yeah, so I'll answer the last one first. Justification, right? Whenever somebody asks me about, you know, leadership development program or training that they need, I always ask them to give me a quick blurb on two things. How is this going to help you as the employee, and how's it going to help the organization, right? What are you going to bring back to the organization that's going to make it better? That's going to make you do your job better, which then improves, you know, the mission. I'm big on development, but there has to be a nexus to the job, right? If I'm going to spend, you know, public dollars, I have to make sure that there's that nexus. I think my best advice for aspiring senior executives is continue doing your job, but also, and I mentioned a little before about aperture, right? So many people I've talked to and tried to mentor love their agency and just wanted to be an executive at their agency. I actually told somebody who went for a job a couple of times, didn't get it. And, you know, they were frustrated and they came to talk to me, and I said, look, I have two questions for you, and they may be two different answers. Do you want to be a senior executive, or do you want to be a senior executive at this agency?
Right.
But it's two different answers potentially. And they told me, well, I want to be a senior executive at this agency. And I said, that's fine, but you just limited your opportunity significantly, and you may retire as a 15 if you don't open up your aperture. And that's exactly what happened. They ended up retiring as a 15 because they wanted to stay in that agency no matter what. You know, some people tell me, I want to, you know, this is my boss's job is a job, you know, for me. Great.
Right.
But you're not hiring you. Right. So make sure, that you're prepared for the job. But if not, you know, if you don't get it, make sure that you start looking, you know, for other opportunities. And the higher up you go, the broader your aperture is, and the less deep has to be your technical, right? I mentioned before about being the HR director for a few months at NSF. I don't consider myself an HR professional. You know, I could be an HR leader, right? And HR falls, you know, under my purview. And I could run an HR shop like I did, but I didn't grow up in the HR world. I wasn't a 201 since I was a GS5, right? So it's just trying to make sure people understand not to cut themselves short, right? That if you're a contracting specialist, maybe you could do an administrative services job because they have procurement under it, but they also have facilities and security and some other things, right? But they need a procurement person more than anything else. And you don't know that unless you give it a shot. All right. So don't limit yourself when you're on USA Jobs that you mentioned before. And don't limit yourself when people are giving you opportunities to expand, you know, your horizons and to be able to give you, that different look from a different seat, right? One of my mentors, Robin Bailey, always said, you see from where you sit, right? But if you don't get to sit in that chair, you don't get to see what that individual is going to see. So yeah, it's sometimes it's tough, right? And it's a tough pill to swallow. I've been in a position where I thought I was going to get my boss's job. It didn't happen. And I just said, okay, well, no big deal. I'm not going to get mad. I just, what am I going to do about it? Well, you start looking, and if you don't think you want to stay in your current job, you start looking, and ultimately, I left that agency, and it worked out well for me. But you have to have control of your own career at some point, because there's only so much other people are going to be able to do for you.
Right. No, excellent. Those are excellent guidance for that. And before I let you get a chance to say your last words, and if people want to get a hold of you, Javier, this is the best way to get a hold of you?
Absolutely. LinkedIn is a great platform to get in touch with me and send me a message or, connect with me there.
Yeah. So ladies and gentlemen, also this will be once this recording, if you don't get it now, you'll be able to go back and definitely get this. So reach out to me and I'll make sure you get it. And Javier, as we draw down toward the end, I want to ask you a question. What keeps you grounded?
Yeah. The mission focus, right? Taking care of my folks, being able to do something that's worth doing. As I said, it's not our institution. It's the American public's institution. It's not our money. It's the American public's money. What we do, regardless of what agency you work for, you're doing something on behalf of this great nation that we live in, and even local and state, right? I'm not just saying federal, right? Any level of government, right? You're doing it for the people that you serve, the constituents, and I would say that what keeps me going is that public service mindset that we've been talking about throughout this entire podcast.
Yes, sir.
The ability to be able to sit at the end of the week and say, did I have a good week or not? And what did I do? What could I do better? And then taking care of your folks, right? Giving them the opportunities that they need, giving them, the room to grow. I just recently, one of my best employees decided to move to another agency, and, he called me up and he said, hey, I have some bad news for you. And he told me, and I said, that's not bad news. That's sad news for me. Right. But this is an opportunity for you to be able to expand your horizons and do something that you really want to do. And now I have another member of my board of directors at a different agency that I could call and say, hey, what are you doing over there? We're having a similar challenge over here. Right. So, that's what keeps me grounded. And I'll tell you one thing that I'm so proud of. A guy I work with in HR, as a matter of fact, he left NSF and he went to a different agency. And he called me a couple of weeks ago and he said, hey, I just want to let you know, I got my SES. And I was like, man, that's great. And it was awesome to be able to, we talked for, we worked together for a long time, and, we had a lot of good conversations. I never thought anything of it. And he said, but, you were one of my strongest mentors. And I was like, oh man, that made me feel great. Can you pin me?
Wow.
Man, I'm driving down to Fort Lee, Virginia in a couple of weeks. I'm going to be able to stand in front of his family and his colleagues. And it just chokes me up that somebody that, I considered a colleague, somebody who's a great guy, and he considers me his mentor. And for him to ask me to have the honor of pinning the SES pin on him, just means the world to me. And that right there is an example of what keeps me grounded and what keeps me moving forward, because anything I could do to help the next generation, I'm certainly going to do. And what an honor.
Well, that is an honor. Oh, that is one of the best honors when you're able to pin somebody like that. That is stupendous. And we got one more question, and I think you answered part of it. But what motivates your mindset, and what should listeners take with them after hearing your story today?
Anything can happen to anybody. If this kid from Northern New Jersey got to where I am, we could all do it. Just work hard, stay focused, learn as much as you can, stay curious, get as many mentors as you can. Some people reach out to you, they don't even know you. They may send you something on LinkedIn and say, hey, can I be your mentor? Or, you want to be, can you be my mentor? Just be open to opportunities, and they'll come. I will say this, that patience is also a virtue. And sometimes things happen for a reason, and you just don't know why at that particular time why something didn't happen. And it could be because you have something even better in store for you. You just don't know it.
Wow. Thank you. Hey, like Javier, I want to say, thank you for reminding us that leadership isn't about, como se dice, titles. It's about service, integrity, and making a positive impact on the lives of others. I would tell you that your journey is proof that life dedicated for serving others truly leaves a lasting legacy, which you definitely will leave. Any last words? Anything else you would like to say, Javier, before we go off the air?
Now, I would just say that it is such an honor to be here, Jose. It's an honor for me to be a public servant. It's been just a great ride for me, and I have quite a number of years to go in front of me, but I look forward to them, and I just want to thank everybody for being here. And if anybody needs to connect with me, please do so.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I will put this up one more time before we have to. Somebody needs to, get in touch. He's on LinkedIn. If you don't get the QR code, just look up his name. But ladies and gentlemen, I want to say thank you for being here. Javier, gracias por todo, and have a blessed day. Gracias for everything that you do, sir.
Thank you very much. You too. And thank you for your service, Jose.
My pleasure. Thank you, sir. Auf Wiedersehen.
Hi, I'm Beaker with Military Broadcast Radio TV. We're your virtual MWR, bringing veterans radio, podcasts, gaming, animation, 3D printing, and a community that never leaves you behind. Download our Roku or mobile app today.
Wisdom to share if you listen this week, so pull up a chair and stay for a spell. We're heading down a trail where good stories dwell.